In every kingdom, there is one man the king secretly fears. Not the enemy beyond the walls, not the strongest warrior in the army, not the richest noble in the court. And sometimes, that man does not survive. Long ago, there was a powerful ruler known across the lands as King Alaric. His kingdom was prosperous. His armies were disciplined and feared by neighboring nations. Merchants traveled from distant lands to trade within his cities, and the people believed they lived under the rule of a strong and wise monarch. From the outside, it seemed like King Alaric had built a perfect kingdom, but the man who thinks better than the king himself. But the truth was more complicated. Behind the throne, hidden from the admiration of the public, stood a man whose mind quietly shaped the future of the kingdom. His name was Lucian. Lucian was not born into royalty. He had no noble bloodline and commanded no soldiers. His robes were simple, and he carried himself with the calm humility of a scholar rather than the arrogance of a court noble. Yet everyone in the palace knew something important about him. Lucian's mind was extraordinary. Whenever the kingdom faced danger, Lucian seemed to see the solution before anyone else. When enemy armies gathered near the borders, he predicted their movements days before the spies reported them. When drought threatened the farms, he reorganized the kingdom's grain supplies and prevented famine. Many of the kingdom's greatest victories had begun as quiet ideas spoken by Lucian during late-night strategy meetings. At first, King Alaric admired him deeply. The king praised him in front of the court. He rewarded him with gold and influence, and he trusted his advice more than anyone else's. To the people watching from the outside, it looked like the perfect partnership. A powerful king, guided by a brilliant mind. But inside the palace, whispers slowly began to grow. Nobles who envied Lucian's influence began speaking quietly among themselves. Some would lean toward one another during council meetings and whisper things like, "The advisor is the true mind behind the throne." Others would say, "Without Lucian, would the king still seem so wise?" At first, these whispers were harmless, but in a royal court, whispers have a strange way of growing louder. And sooner or later, they reach the ears of the king. One day, during an important meeting in the royal court, a foreign ambassador arrived from a neighboring kingdom. The court gathered in the grand throne room. Nobles lined the walls while royal guards stood silently beside tall stone pillars. Torches flickered against the walls, casting long shadows across the chamber. The ambassador bowed deeply before King Alaric. He spoke respectfully, praising the kingdom's strength and prosperity. But then, he made a mistake. While speaking about the kingdom's recent victories, the ambassador turned toward Lucian and said something that changed everything. He said, "It is clear that the king is fortunate to have such a brilliant advisor. Many believe the wisdom of this kingdom flows from his mind." For a moment, the entire throne room fell silent. Lucian lowered his eyes respectfully, not wanting to appear proud. The nobles looked at one another, and King Alaric smiled. But it was a kind of smile that hides something darker beneath it. Inside the king's mind, a dangerous thought had just been planted. Later that night, King Alaric walked alone through the quiet halls of the palace. The torches burned low as his footsteps echoed across the stone floors. He thought about every battle the kingdom had won, every law he had signed, every decision the people believed had come from his wisdom. And slowly, a troubling question began to form in his mind. What if the kingdom believes I am only king because of him? Power can tolerate many things. It can tolerate enemies. It can tolerate criticism, but it cannot tolerate doubt. From that moment forward, King Alaric no longer saw Lucian as a loyal advisor. Instead, he began to see something far more dangerous, a shadow. A shadow growing too large behind the throne. Lucian began to notice the change almost immediately. The king's voice became colder during meetings. Discussions that once lasted hours now ended quickly. The warmth that once existed between them slowly disappeared. But Lucian believed the king still trusted him. After all, Every decision he had made had been for the kingdom, and for the king. He believed loyalty would protect him. It was wrong. One morning, a royal messenger arrived at Lucien's chamber. The king requests your presence in the throne room immediately. Lucien walked through the palace halls calmly, unaware that this meeting would be his last as a free man. When he entered the throne room, something felt different. The chamber was quieter than usual, and guards stood along the walls in greater numbers than normal. King Alaric sat upon the throne, watching Lucien carefully as he approached. For a long moment, the king said nothing. Then he spoke. You have served this kingdom well. Lucien bowed respectfully, but the king's next words carried a cold finality. A king must always protect the strength of his crown. Lucien slowly understood. This was not about betrayal. This was not about treason. This was about something far more dangerous. Fear. Fear. The fear that another man's brilliance had begun to shine too brightly beside the throne. The king finally said the words that sealed Lucien's fate. A king cannot allow another man to outshine his crown. The guards stepped forward. Lucien did not resist. He simply bowed one final time before being escorted from the throne room. And just like that, the kingdom lost its smartest mind. At first, life in the kingdom continued as normal. But slowly, the decisions became less wise. Small mistakes began to appear. Then, larger ones. And the king, who once ruled with the guidance of a brilliant mind, found himself facing problems he no longer knew how to solve. Because power has a dangerous weakness. Those who sit at the top often destroy the very people who help them rise. Not because they are enemies, but because their brilliance becomes too visible. And in the game of power, sometimes the greatest danger is not disloyalty. It is being too valuable to your king.